Welcome back to another Light Reading podcast. My name is Phil Harvey, and joining me today here at the Network X Americas show in Irving, Texas, is Nico Girard. And Nico is the co-founder and CEO of OXIO. Did I say it right?
Absolutely. Perfect.
I said everything right.
No, perfect.
Let's just stop right there. I think this is a time to celebrate. We can end the podcast here. Thanks, everybody. It was great. First of all, thanks for being here. Thanks for being at the show. I really don't know much about OXIO, but I as a company, but I do know the space that you're in and I'm very familiar with the market need that you're trying to fill.
Right.
So let's start at the beginning and give us a bit of background on how the company got going, and then how things are going now that you've been in business, five or so years.
Yeah, so about five and a half years.
Okay.
Yeah, so the way we started was basically spending a lot of time in telco, understanding that interfacing with telco is very difficult, right? They build those networks to basically be locked down, battle tested, do very few things at amazing scale, and the rest of the world basically makes it very, very hard to interact with the telco networks.
Right.
And there's many of them. It's a lot of text, it's a lot of processes, and so on and so forth. And so you start realizing, at my previous company, we pioneer what's called sponsored data. So the idea of giving data away as a reward for completing actions, right? And using monetization that come from what they call the OTT world to do some things. We were one of those companies that started to realize that we had to connect to 100 MNOs worldwide, constantly having to normalize the differences, going through the complexity, 12 months to an integrated carrier, and really kind of feeling the pain from the outside.
Yeah.
Just as we started to create OXIO, we looked and said, the way financial services that penetrated other ecosystems with guys like Stripe and others, right, where they have rebuilt the rails, they have exported the tools to make it easy to bring financial service into your realm, and then monetize what they know about financial transactions. Like, this model can apply to telecom.
Okay.
But you need to basically rebuild it from the ground up.
Right.
And that's the mission that we're on to.
Okay, so it's simplifying how, telecom companies have created valuable networks and they have valuable assets, but they treat everything the same. They sort of look at the world as like, it's our network, you come to us.
And that's part of it. It's like, realistically today, the network is not differentiated.
Right.
Anyone can go to Mavenir, Ericsson, Nokia, buy pretty much the same thing. There's a certain know-how and do it at scale, and
sure.
But you don't really get anything different. I think a lot of people are hard pressed to understand what's the business case for 5G today, for instance, and a lot of people here are already talking about 6G and all this. So the idea is similar to how AWS has been able to remove all the complexity of dealing with the data center. It's like, I need one server, I need 10,000 tomorrow, I need to do all those fancy things. It's all API, it's all easy, it's all dashboard driven. Can we bring telco to the same level? Okay. There's a number of players in the industry that are going after a similar mission, right? It's to me, it's transitioning more on the retail side from like MVNO construct more towards embedded connectivity, right? Revolut added travel eSIM, for instance, right? That doesn't change really the business model of Revolut. It's just convenience, right? And so we see a lot of some of our customers, fintech, retail businesses, content providers, media properties, where they want to bring telco. It's the one product that everyone buys. It's very valuable, but how do we customize it? How do we make it fit into our ecosystem without having to deal with any of the telco stuff on the other side? I don't want to be licensed. I don't know anything about 3GPP. I don't want to deal with an MNO for 24 months. And so you kind of need to bring that to the same level as a Stripe or AWS.
Would you describe OXIO as a telecom company or a platform company or something else?
A little bit of both, right? Like we tend to really have two brands, right? Our CTO, Adil, came out of Verizon after 25 years, built networks his entire professional career, so we have that kind of expertise, but we also have people that come more from the platform engineering and data science who've never done telco in long run.
Okay.
Right? And I kind of like the duality of it, because ultimately our customer doesn't want to know that much about telco. So it's all about how do we give them the power of doing things and really customize it all the way. without talking about 5G slicing or QE
Yeah, right.
or
All the boring
buzzwords.
bits of
Because it's difficult, right? And
Yeah.
and then what's interesting is that the value prop of telco is shifting away from the pipe to making sense of the pipe.
Yeah.
That becomes a data science problem where
Yeah.
it's not really a telco specific anything. It's
Right.
the input is telco insight, but after that it's really generic data science.
It's
Right?
it's more about what's riding over the pipe, how is it treated, what's happening to the data
Right.
afterward, that sort of thing. So when your customer set, I assume it's mostly other businesses. Are they particular businesses? Do you have particular verticals you're more interested in, or a particular size of business that makes sense?
Yeah, so for us, I mean, it's learning a little bit from the construct of an MVNO where it's hard, and outside of a few, it's not been very successful because you resell a product from a guy who control your economics. It's hard to make the pitch for why your brand is better than the other brand when the product is the same.
Sure.
So when it comes to embedded connectivity, what's good is that you're already in the channel, right? So you might have the fintech who's already a 100 million customer where they just layer telecom as part of that channel. So adoption becomes. So we started in Latin America, where you kind of need to as a startup, kind of graduate into a U.S. market or things like this. So we started in Latin America, and naturally the function of the market started more around fintech, big fintech revolution in the region. A lot of retail, where a lot of people typically it's a 99% prepaid market, right? So most people go to a retailer to top up. So how do we turn those guys into a telecom digital player as opposed to just being a reseller?
Okay.
So we naturally gravitated towards this, but generally the platform is meant for everything, right? Enterprise, retail, M2M, IoT, anything. But it's all about let you do what you want to do without the complexity. On a global level, give you the same API that works everywhere, and then we connect directly to the tower locally of the MNOs and of course help them monetize that money.
What's a good can you give me a couple of use cases that are maybe wildly different in application or market, but they're both using your platform,
Yeah, I'll give you two examples. So one that we're without names because we're launching in September, but it's a big content company in the U.S. that caters to Hispanics and Latinos.
Okay.
And as we know, there's about 65 million of them in the U.S. Yeah. They have 200-300 million friends and family back in Latam.
Right.
And so the flows for them is there's a lot of money that goes over the border to go pay for wireless. And so this company had the idea of, and the way they monetize is by understanding their audience and matching it to advertisers. So their idea was to build a digital experience that marries telecom, content, fintech into a single platform that we power. And the offering is kind of cool because for the first time in telecom, you're able to mix lines in the US with lines in Mexico and lines in Colombia and Puerto Rico and all this. And so that becomes like a single zone.
Interesting.
And to me, it's kind of a good example of when people ask me, what do you do different from a carrier? It's like, well, in this case, it's not a single carrier that spans all those countries.
Yeah.
There's no carrier that can mix and match lines from different countries because typically, even if you're Vodafone Telefonica, you operate 12 networks in 12 markets, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then ultimately, the business model is not to make margin on the telecom product, it's to actually collect business intelligence to understand next level about your customers so you can have better targeting on the other side. So that's a cool example of something that we do that is different from, say, a Claro or an AT&T.
Right, yeah.
But that same platform on the other side powers good majority of the payment devices in Mexico, for instance, where it's like repurposed Android devices. And in this case, the ability to be able to address different set of towers from different providers means more coverage, which means more transactions. But also typically a lot of fraud. So what people do is remove the SIM from the device, put it in their phone, watch Netflix, but then now it's the service provider who's paying for it, not the end users, right?
Right.
So on something like this, we're able to right-size the plan, give them much better pricing, give them eSIM if they need to, data pooling, all the good stuff, but also let them build very simple policy. Oh, if the SIM card is removed, I need a ping in my system so I can trigger fraud or something like this, right?
Yeah.
So on one end, it's like a very custom retail experience that marries, various other adjacent industries for a retail-based experience versus on the other side, it's completely M2M. I just need the device to be connected. I want to optimize my cost for it.
Oh, that's a really good example too, because you're right. There's no single carrier, even though they have assets in different countries, they own parts of networks. They don't see it holistically, and they don't have those networks tied together to cooperate.
A good example of that is SoftBank, right? I was just talking to them recently where their network footprint is in Japan. The brand is global.
Right.
So they started this initiative beyond Japan. It's like, hey, how do we do more things in telecom, even though all the towers are back in Japan, right?
It is weird that SoftBank is such a familiar brand even to Americans, but
Absolutely.
we don't buy any SoftBank services here. They're not for sale. There's nothing.
The vast majority of people know about that company.
Yeah, but we think of them as like this. Oh yeah, they're the ones that they funded. They were investors in Yahoo and Sprint, and a lot of the familiar American technology names that we.
WeWork, Uber, all that.
Yeah. But I've never actually bought something from SoftBank.
Right.
Maybe that's an interesting thing, because global brands can maybe now extend their presence without having to strike a multi-layered, multi-billion-dollar deal with a global carrier.
And there's I believe there are a lot of use cases and products that don't exist because of this lack of federation layer in telecom.
Okay.
I remember talking a few years back to executives at Dell where they had a project just to have a business laptop that can connect anywhere in the world, right? You ship it to an employee at some big bank, it goes everywhere. They just had no platform to build that, right? And they're not going to start connecting with 1,000 mobile operators, and so all of a sudden, and you're not going to roam because it's expensive.
Super
so all of a sudden,
expensive,
that laptop doesn't exist, right? And there's just a lot of use cases in terms of convenience. Do we think that the Apple and the Samsung and WhatsApp of this world will not embed connectivity if you could? Do it fairly easily on top of someone's rails.
How do you? How are you privately funded? Like, what's funding OXIO at the moment?
Yeah, venture backed.
Okay.
So typical venture capital. It's always interesting in telecom because it's not an industry that's super sexy as far as venture capital, but
it's telecom is perceived as slow money,
slow money, long cycles.
Long cycles.
So when it hits, it's a lot of money, but it takes a while.
Lots of digging.
It's a lot of work, and part of it is that's what we're trying to change, right? Like the analogy that I use sometimes is it's kind of like when Kalanick came out with Uber, but the first job is to build the roads so you can get to Uber.
Right.
To build Uber. And in telecom, that's exactly what it is. I see so many good ideas, but then it's like 18 months of grind to work with the operator, setting it up, and connecting to a network, going through testing and all this. So what we're trying to do is, be able to have a conversation on Monday and launch something on Friday, basically, right? It's just make it as easy as AWS, Stripe to, here's the tool, here to use it. When it comes to the data angle, right, it's always more personalized into a data pipeline, so it takes a little bit longer, but at least the connectivity product need to be able to launch.
Our trial sessions will begin soon. All the trial sessions are happening on the third floor.
And for those listening to this, because we're going to leave it in, it's just an announcement that we're in the wrong place at the wrong time, which happens a lot at trade shows. So
at least it's not a fake
get used to that.
Though.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, this isn't a green screen, obviously. Although the people walking behind me are paid actors, if you're watching on the video bit. Anyway, back to the one quick question about your business model, and then I'll let you go, because obviously, what's the take from your point of view when you strike a deal with a company to sort of build the platform to solve their problem? Are you getting transaction revenue? Are you getting data? Or are they just writing you one big check at the beginning? And
No. So that we want to be a SaaS, right? And telecom, and everyone was talking about SaaS and telecom is not really looked at the true definition of SaaS. So in our case, we want to go away with everything that's prepayment, onboarding platform, minimum requirements, breakage, all of that. So the whole idea is we converted everything into telecom units.
Okay.
You pay for whatever units you use on the platform. So whether the SIM is a retail SIM, IoT SIMs, you want to pause it, you want to restart it later, doesn't matter, right? So everything is real SaaS.
Okay.
And then the business intelligence today, for the most part, comes as part of the service, because that becomes the hook to create like a flywheel. If you can create value elsewhere, and then your collection engine is quote unquote the connectivity layer.
Right.
Then you bring stickiness in the whole relationship. So that's sort of where we look at it. And we're technologists, so people come test it like AWS, right? Like there's no barrier to it.
Right.
Here's a couple SIMs, you test it. and really try to shorten the cycle, make it as easy as possible. You have a lot of volume, you'll pitch you.
That's also another barrier for the business side of telcos that actually want to work with smaller and smaller companies or entrepreneurial companies, is that they still have to be of a certain size in order to get their attention, or to get their account manager to give them the time of day and all that stuff.
I mean, there's so many problems in telco in general. Even access to capital, right?
Right.
To be able, like the disruptors are starved. The guys with a lot of capital are not disrupting. And it's very insular industry, so there's everyone kind of repeat a little bit of the same thing. It takes a while for model to evolve, and part of us coming to an event like this is also like be able to say, hey, if you're building Uber, the road is already built. Just focus on building Uber, right?
Okay.
Kind of putting the word out a little bit.
Sounds great. Okay, well, Nico, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for walking me through all of that. And yeah, we'll be in touch. Thanks for being part of the Light Reading Podcast.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.